Christine Kennedy, and I work in the Office of Alumni Engagement. And I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening for our second virtual talk in our exploration series of events taking place the whole month of November. So maybe you were attending last night's talk with Robin Estrock, and so thank you for joining us for that one. And we have plenty more at the end of the talk today. I will put a little link in to our site where you'll be able to see, we have like another about 5 or 6 events coming up. 2 are actually in Hamilton, or maybe just one on campus, and then all the other ones are virtual. So if you are not in the Hamilton area, you can still connect with us at McMaster. So we're exploring exploration. So we kicked off with on a Monday, on Tuesday, because that was November 1st, we kicked off with a photo contest, like what does exploration mean to you? And we had lots of different people give sort of a graphic illustration of what they thought. And with exploration, the theme, we thought, well, we should really have an explorer come and talk to us about, what exploration is. So we are so thrilled that Jill Heinerth can join us. She is an explorer in residence with the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, and she was the first one. So that is quite amazing. Let me just take a minute here to read why she's an explorer. She is an underwater explorer, writer, photographer, and filmmaker, and of course, a speaker. She has led expeditions diving into icebergs in Antarctica, which would be very cold, volcanic lava tubes, and submerged caves worldwide. And you're going to see some fantastic photos of all those wonderful places. Her memoir, Into the Planet, has been lauded by the Wall Street Journal, Oprah Magazine, and the New York Times, and she also is the author of a children's book, The Aquanaut. It's a blue ribbon selection for Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. Jill is a fellow of the International Scuba Diving Hall of Fame, Underwater Academy of Arts and Sciences, Women Divers Hall of Fame, and the Explorers Club, which awarded her with the William Beebe Award for Ocean Exploration. So we are thrilled to have her. Please welcome Jill Heinerth.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with you all tonight and to talk about my favorite topic, which is exploration and also the explorer's mindset. So what it is that makes us explorers, because I'm not the only explorer in this group tonight. You are all explorers too. And although I'm going to take you on a wild ride around the world and underwater, I hope that by the end of this presentation that you'll see that there's a lot of commonalities in us. And I say that you're explorers because just by signing up for this webinar tonight, that means you're curious and you're engaging and learning something new. As a little girl, I grew up in Mississauga, or Cooksville it was at the time, loving the underwater and outdoor world, and trying to find a way to explore. And as a child of the 60s, I actually watched on television in school men walking on the surface of the moon or driving around on little lunar rovers. And as I reflect back on that today, I realize at the time it really ignited my imagination. But even more than those men walking around on the surface of the moon, it was the image that we saw, that big blue marble, that really got me excited. And although I, never got to be an astronaut, because I was certainly interested as a young girl, in many ways, my career today does overlap. Not the least of which is because of the equipment that I wear is very similar to what an astronaut would wear to do a spacewalk. So I'm constantly schlepping a lot of equipment around the world in any way that I can, and taking with me heavy, complicated life support gear underwater, but also cameras. And sometimes I'm working with a team of people, a support team or a film crew, but at other times I'm actually all on my own. And my work takes me to fantastic places like under the ice or even on top of the ice in Canada's Arctic. This is on top of the sea ice in the Northwest Passage. So travel is definitely a big part of what I do in traveling with all of that equipment. But you'll find me in places like this where you wouldn't even imagine people would go diving. But in the western desert of Egypt, there are some pretty interesting water holes that I've explored, as well as some of the springs that come out in the oases in Russia or in Egypt. But also, I go to places like under the Ural Mountains in Russia, where we dive in the world's longest gypsum cave. And I'll even dive inside an active volcano. So, this volcano in the Canary Islands actually has the longest submerged lava tubes in the world. And we've found and documented some very interesting new species from these places. Now, you've probably got a bit of an idea that I like to go to places that are hard, and I really love caves, but I do also dive on wrecks as well. Like this is down in Micronesia in Truk Lagoon, where there's a whole fleet of World War II ships sunk on the bottom. I still do train people from time to time. This is James Cameron, and I actually got to take him on his first cave dive, which was amazing. But as I said, my work is often involving shooting. So I have the technical skills and abilities to go to places that nobody's been before. So I need to bring back those images. Sometimes I'm still getting to do work with exciting, what I would call charismatic megafauna. So whale sharks in Mexico, or mobile rays in the Azores, or even just a beautiful mother and baby manatee in Florida. But it is caves that excite me more than anything else. And I know that if you have no familiarity or experience with caves or water-filled caves, this is all going to be pretty unusual. Because most people think about caves and they just think about blackness. And it's a bit terrifying, and it kind of, stirs up some claustrophobia. Well, that's normal because these are dangerous places, but it's so much more than just blackness. These caves, although, some passages are small, some are huge. Like I could put an entire building in some of the spaces that I swim through, so big that I can't even see the walls or the floors or the ceiling for reference. And in these caves, I feel like I'm diving through a museum of natural history, because this is a place where we can learn about Earth's past climate. We can learn about ancient civilizations that use these spaces as portals to another world. But we can also study biology and so many other topics in caves. There's a lot of rich information for us to find, explore, document, and also extend the reach of scientists who don't have the same abilities or access that I do to go to these places. So, explorers, who are we? What makes us up as explorers? Well, most importantly, consider that you and I, we're both explorers and we are seekers. So we don't necessarily follow maps, we're actually making them. And, if you're writing a thesis, you are an explorer because you're writing the handbook for others to follow. My exploration career began in the about 1995 on this expedition here. This was with the United States Deep Caving Team on a search for the world's deepest cave system, or what we thought could be the world's deepest cave system. And it's here in the Sierra Mazatecas, these rainforest covered, mist shrouded mountains, a really beautiful landscape. And there are small pockets of villagers that live in the mountains, but they actually live in a world of water scarcity. Like one person in the family has a responsibility of fetching water every day because they don't have sort of normal running water. And yet, if we peel away the front of this mountain, there's a lot of water inside the mountain. So some cave systems are a combination of dry caving and diving. And here inside the mountain, currently this cave is over 1,500 vertical meters high. There's about 53 miles of mapped passageways, 25 entrances. And if you were exploring this cave, there were dry sections where you might rappel down on a rope, crawl on your hands and knees, be half submerged. But at other times, you would reach a place like this. And at a place like this, you have no choice if you want to go forward, you need to go underwater. But if you finish a dive in this location and you need your tanks filled, your tanks are going to have to go back up out of the mountain up 2 miles of rope. So it's an incredible commitment to explore these kinds of caves. And some of my colleagues will spend 2 or 3 months in the blackness inside the cave doing work here. So in 1995, we thought, well, maybe we could work from the bottom of the mountain and establish a base camp and maybe find our way up to where the explorers had left behind. So we hiked down the mountain, took a series of days to establish a base camp. But things were promising because we knew the location where the water came out of the mountain in what we call a resurgence. And in 1994, the water had been quite clear. But a year later, it was just mud. So landslides, a lot of rain in the mountains had really contaminated the river running through this canyon, making it really difficult to explore. But even difficult situations like this, where you can't even see a way to achieve your goals, can spawn some pretty interesting ideas if you remain open minded. So, explorers need to be very versatile, adaptable in order to grow. And 2 years later, we actually put to work something that we just dreamt about back at around the campfire in central Mexico. So we had difficulty mapping what we were diving because we could hardly see through the water. And so we thought, what if we could build a device that could map the cave whether we could see it or not? And my colleague, Dr. Bill Stone, came up with this. So this is a sonar mapping device with an inertial guidance system that I could drive through the cave. And as I did, it would ping the walls with sonar and slowly add data to create the world's first accurate three-dimensional map of any subterranean space, dry or wet. So it was pretty exciting to drive this. And you're actually seeing the little sonar discs there in the front. It has a couple of wings just because it was hard to drive this device. It weighed over, well, about, let's see, about 160 kilograms. So pretty big and difficult to drive. It took a lot of training. In fact, for me, it was really about 2 years of commitment to training and buying gear and working with others and developing the systems and the infrastructure that we needed to do some dives that had really never been done before. At times, we were even wearing two of these life support devices called rebreathers. When a scuba diver wears a tank on their back and they exhale and make bubbles, that's one way to go diving. But with this device, you can actually recapture those bubbles, scrub the carbon dioxide out of them, and allow the system to inject small bits of oxygen to make up for what your body's metabolizing. So, in other words, I can swim through the cave, kind of recycling my gas and not making bubbles. So that keeps the visibility clearer. It extends the range that I can go, importantly, and allows me to constantly mix exotic gases to give me the ideal life support at any depth. But when I swim off into the cave, I could have, 250 or more kilograms of equipment between a mapper and an extra scooter and a couple of rebreathers and scuba tanks and everything else that we need to do these dives. And for me, my longest mission on this project was a mission of 22 hours. So it's a long time. And for anyone in the audience out there that are divers, the 22 hours is made up of 5 hours of bottom time at about 90 meters of depth. And the rest of that time is what we call decompression. So very, very slowly depressurizing the body to release all of the excess gas from our bodies before we can safely get to the surface. So we had to develop a lot of new things, new equipment, new techniques, new procedures in order to be safe. And one of the things that we used as well was a radio location beacon. So from inside the cave, I could send a signal through the rock, and these guys could run around and listen for the pinging and get precisely on top of me and drop flags in the ground and then register our map with GPS. So pretty powerful stuff. And using that technology, these guys have tracked me through, this is just a field, but they've paddled a canoe through an alligator infested swamp. They've actually tracked me underneath a golf course. This is actually a golf course community where I swam underneath this poor person's house. I've even swam underneath the Sonny's barbecue restaurant in Alachua, Florida. So as I was swimming underground, these guys are tracking me in real time, and they realized, holy mackerel, she's going underneath the restaurant. And they crashed in the side door with their backpacks and little orange flags and even a machete because we'd been in the bush, and literally yelling out, cave survey team coming through. And there I was underneath the potato salad, like 300 feet below the potato salad. But these, tracking missions have taken me to some other unusual places. Like as we were trying to find the real source of a remarkable river in Florida, we ended up going through the urban network of caving, which are stormwater conduits that drain the water off the landscape and often deliver them into beautiful waterways. So knowing where our water is and how we might be overusing it or unintentionally polluting it allows us to protect it for the next generation. Because as I swim through these caves, I'm literally swimming through the veins of Mother Earth. So I am swimming in the sustenance of the planet, everything we need for humanity, for wildlife, for all of the industry that we enjoy. And water protection is going to be one of the most important things for us to get a handle on. I truly believe that water must be seen as a basic human right for everyone. So clean water and basic sanitation needs to be provided on a global scale. Because if we don't have clean water for everyone, we will be living in a world of desperation, a world of conflict. Because if you're, dying of thirst, you would do anything, right? Anything for survival. And so if we don't solve those two basic issues, it's going to be a big problem for humanity. But the water that I swim through in these caves, that's the beginning of the pipe, right? So the water comes out of a cave and it nourishes a beautiful spring like this. Oftentimes these locations, these springs are protected because they're beautiful. It makes great parkland. But we also need to think of the fact that the recharge zone that serves water for this spring also needs to be protected. And it might not be as beautiful a place as this, because the water that comes out of that cave will be influenced by everything that happened on the surface of the earth. And when it leaves this spring basin, it may be nourishing a creek, some subaquatic vegetation, joining a larger river, and then going to a place like where the mother baby and baby manatee are trying to survive. And so clean water can help their survival, or it can usher in a decline like an algal bloom. So it's really important to understand the pathways of water through our planet. Now, that mapping device that I got to drive in those caves in Florida so long ago, I've continued to work with Dr. Bill Stone, who's the inventor of that technology. And that technology has continued to develop. And today it's called Sunfish. And Sunfish, as you can see, is a lot smaller and lighter than that mapper that I used to drive. And today it's artificially intelligent, autonomous, and can drive through the cave on its own and explore. So this is a machine that can explore. It doesn't need a tether. It doesn't need instructions. It's fully AI. And as it swims through the tunnel and sees one doorway on the left and a tunnel on the right, it can make choices. And so it will survey, make choices, sometimes turn around. It knows how to conserve its resources and come out when it needs to. And we've even launched it off the back of the boat in the Channel Islands and just told it to go to the island, find a cave, map it, and bring back the map. So this device will be able to go to max ocean depths, dirty water, places where I couldn't necessarily go, but it's also destined to go to Jupiter's moon, Europa, and map the liquid ocean beneath the frozen surface. And as it swims through these places and finds its sense of self, it will also have other capabilities to do sampling, water chemistry, and photography, things like that. So, yeah, in a way, it is replacing me. And as much as I might have wanted to be an astronaut, at least I got to be a part of this technology that will put the first cave diver in space, a robot cave diver. So we may not necessarily know where things are leading us, but we are leaders and we're ready to step up and step into the darkness. And that's what I did when I went to Antarctica over 20 years ago. I had been watching actually satellite images online and saw that a large piece of the Ross Ice Shelf was about to break away from Antarctica. In fact, this iceberg, the B-15 iceberg, was the largest moving object on the planet, about the size of Jamaica. And we decided to go there from New Zealand, make a 12-day crossing across the Southern Ocean in horrific seas in order to intercept that iceberg and be the first people to cave dive inside an iceberg. It had never been done before. And frankly, I had no idea what to expect. I prepared as best I could, but every day brought new surprises that we had to deal with, regroup, and consider in terms of a risk assessment. But it was incredibly exciting. To me, this was like going to another planet. And even just getting to a piece of this large iceberg was incredibly difficult. But when we did actually begin the diving program and start to descend, we discovered that so many of these icebergs are just full of cracks and fissures and tunnels and passageways that water is flowing through. And where there is water, there is life. And here in this location, where the iceberg is actually sort of tripped up on the seafloor, we see quite a lot of life, both on the seafloor, but also in the ice, attached to the ice, coming out of tunnels in the ice, living in burrows in the ice. It's incredibly exciting to see. So when we went there, we honestly didn't know if we would find iceberg caves. So it was a hypothesis. And that expedition was hard. In fact, we had some very, very close calls. And I learned a lot about sort of my discipline in terms of protocols and safety. And I also learned a lot about resilience. That's very, very important that we're resilient. Now, I also work in places in Central America, Mexico, Cuba, the Bahamas. And in these places, I work with archaeologists and paleontologists. And we will often rappel down into what is a drinking water well, in fact. So, an ancient Mayan drinking water well. And when we rappel down into the water, it looks like this. So the top is the underside of the drinking water well. The stripe down the center is a pipe. And there's literally an old guy pumping a wooden pump handle to bring water up the pipe. But here at the bottom of the photo, we have a debris mound of everything that ever fell down that hole or was ritually placed there. Because we have to imagine that when the water table is different, like when ocean levels are different, then this could have been a dry space. And indeed, it was much, much drier during Mayan times. So on the top of the mound, we'll find modern garbage, rusted buckets. We'll find things like this cow skull that could have, been accidentally fallen in or been ritually placed. But we'll find more interesting cow skulls like this one. This one actually has silver applied to his teeth, which may have been a way for the Mayan people to hide some of their valuables when they were, fleeing the overcrowded, population centers like Chichen Itza and Tulum and heading off into the wilderness to find new places to get water and grow food. So this might be the action of climate refugees trying to protect their resources, their valuables. We'll also find water carrying vessels like this. This is a Spanish colonial era water carrying vessel that might have been lowered down the hole. But in caves, we'll also find objects that are literally embedded in the cave floor as the sediments have, built up over time. And it's those sorts of objects that we couldn't even consider bringing out of a cave because we would destroy it in the process. So 20 years ago, we used to bring things out of the cave, like skulls, for instance. Like in this case, this is a Mayan skull in a cave in Mexico. This is a Lucayan Indian skull in the Bahamas. And you can actually see that we're preparing to extricate this for a paleontologist from an academic institution in the Bahamas. But that never quite felt right. And so we've wanted to create better technologies that would allow us to leave these artifacts where they belong, where they're well protected. Like this. This is actually a funerary vessel. This isn't a photograph. It's actually a scan. And today we can do really advanced 3D scanning techniques and can not only show off an object, but show an archaeologist an object in context so they can see it beside other things. So a pot beside a skull, beside a piece of wood, beside, gee, was the cave painted? You know? So this kind of information we can feed to scientists all over the world, and they never have to go cave diving. They never have to go to Mexico. And today, what we can do is give them a device like this Microsoft HoloLens. And this technology developed by Corey Jaskolski, one of my partners, allows us to show people a holographic simulation of what we've just scanned. So if you're wearing the HoloLens, that's our archaeologist there sitting on the edge of the well. Corey's wearing the HoloLens, and he can actually see this skull that we just scanned underwater. And this is going to be a saber-toothed bear skull. So you're now seeing what he sees through his glasses, and he can manipulate a series of menus just using his fingers, and he can walk around the skull and see it in this context of where we scanned it. So it's a powerful technology for education, outreach, many different applications. Here he's just going to switch a human skull up on the table and put the or the bear skull away. And here he can actually even rotate that skull. Now, if Guillermo, the archaeologist, was wearing glasses too, he would see it from his own angle. And here we're just going to zoom in on the spot, this blunt force trauma right under the spot right there. That's where this poor skull got probably hit over the head with a club and thrown in the cenote. Horrible way to go, I guess. But that technology also lets us share our results with these very generous indigenous people that have welcomed us into their land. Because everything is about collaboration. It's so important to collaborate with people and connect, especially with multidisciplinary individuals. Now, I also work with biologists quite a bit, and we're looking at unique life that lives in underwater caves. In this case, this is a cave-adapted animal that has no eyes and no pigment, because you don't need any if you live in the blackness, right? But we also find fish that are uniquely adapted to living in the darkness of underwater caves. They have some other interesting sensory capabilities that we don't have. Like this animal, no eyes, no pigment, but he does have venomous fangs and pincers. He can attack something 40 times his size, suck the life out of it, inject it with venom, turn its guts into jello, and then eat it over time. So if it was the size of a cat, it would be the deadliest thing on earth. And we find them swimming in the cave today, and we also find them in the fossil record that predates the dinosaurs. So you're kind of looking at a living, swimming dinosaur. And many of these animals can give us clues to evolution and survival and longevity. Like this cave-adapted crayfish lives up to 200 years, and his closest relative in the open water might live 2 or 3 years. So he has some secret for living in this very food scarce environment. Now, other, warm water stuff that I get to do is down in the Bahamas, where we actually look at the geology to inform us about Earth's past climate. These caves were formed when They were dry, so when water soaked into the ground, dripped from the ceiling to the floor, creating these formations. But ocean levels and water tables have gone up several times over Earth's history. And so we wonder, how old are the caves? How many times have they been dry? And we can learn that from the red and orange material that you see in this slide. Because although this cave is in the Bahamas, the red and orange material has come from the Sahara Desert on a Sahara dust storm. So these dust storms will frequently bring that very red dust all the way across the Atlantic Ocean and then deposit it on top of the Bahama Islands or even on the eastern seaboard or Central America. And then that dust slowly gets carried down through the substrate and ends up in our caves. We can sample like discrete layers of that dust, or we can also see it, like this is also a layer that we've sort of disturbed, but we could also see it inside the rocks. So you hold a light up to a rock and it looks almost like a lava lamp. And working with scientists from the University of Miami, we've actually been tasked with bringing out some of these formations so that they can cut them open and look for the layers of the Sahara dust and compare it to other climate data to determine the age of the cave, which is around 450,000 years old, and it's been dry 3 or 4 times in Earth's history. So this sort of stratigraphy, these layers, is, not unlike, tree ring growth that dendrochronologists look like, or ice cores. It's all similar. Now, I'm going to spend just a few minutes sharing with you some stuff that's a bit closer to home because I just love talking to Canadian audiences and sharing some of the wonders that we have in our backyard. One of my favorite places to go is Newfoundland, and I just came back from there quite recently. There's a fantastic record of World War II history in Newfoundland that a lot of people don't know about. Like this shipwreck was sunk by a German U-boat in World War II. There are several shipwrecks like this one that have been sunk by German U-boats. This is a deck gun that you're looking at on the stern of this vessel. This was actually an iron ore carrying vessel that brought a very high grade of iron ore to the shipbuilding effort of World War II. So the Germans thought if they could sink these wrecks, then it would maybe destroy the capacity of the mine or scare people away from using that particular source. So these are war graves, but they're also artificial reefs, the wrecks themselves. But we also dive inside the actual mine that the iron ore came from because it's now flooded and full of water. And we can follow the industrial archaeology of the pipeworks and the machinery within the mine and learn quite a bit about what life was like as a worker. Here you can see that there is an inscription on the wall that's actually been painted with soot from the miner's cap lamp. And it says James Bennett, and he's created this little caricature of himself. But the thing that I thought was hilarious about this little inscription is that around the corner, like on the back side of this pillar, there's a box spring mattress and a lunch box. So I think James Bennett was not just like drawing cartoons on the wall, but he might have been taking naps during the workday. But some of the inscriptions are a little more sobering, like straight above my head, almost at the top of the frame. There's a tiny white cross on the wall. And anytime a miner lost his life, they would paint a white cross on the wall. So this location would have been the site of an accident. Most likely, like on the floor, there are some tracks, train tracks that the ore carts used to run on, and they're just running by gravity downhill into the mine, going very, very high speeds. And a lot of men were hit by full iron ore carts because it's noisy, it's dark, they don't see or hear them coming. And that was the cause of quite a number of fatalities. Now, if we go all the way to the opposite coast of Canada, out to British Columbia, there are many more opportunities to dive with quite a lot of, big animal life, like these sea lions, Stellars and California sea lions. And they are fantastic because they're so curious. Like we never want to harass marine life, and we don't intentionally ever chase, large marine life. But sometimes, like with sea lions, you get in the water and they find you. In fact, as soon as you jump in the water, they're just like bringing the whole family over for a visit. And swimming with sea lions in British Columbia can be sort of, well, it can be fun and exciting, but sometimes it's almost like being with a pack of puppies, or sometimes even a little bit more like a bar fight because they grab your fins and sometimes even steal them. But back out in the just open water areas, it's still beautiful, even if you're not encountering these sea lions or giant Pacific octopus or whales. The seafloor is just covered with color and life. It's beautiful. But I also like to spend a lot of time in the north, like on the sea ice. Um, it's stunningly beautiful, but I think of it as an endangered species as well. The Arctic is warming so quickly that it's problematic not just for the people that live there, but also for the wildlife, like the walrus or the polar bear. It's becoming even more difficult to find them in their traditional, breeding or hunting or other areas. Um, but when we do get to see them, I've had some pretty fantastic opportunities to document them for films. Like for the nature of things, you can look up the film Under Thin Ice to see me actually swimming with wild polar bears, to get the image of them swimming above me in the water. And let me tell you, polar bears are a lot bigger than you might imagine. Like this is a polar bear front paw print and beside my glove. So these animals are huge. And the only thing they're thinking about is wanting to eat us when they see us. Um, we work out of a little canoe like this when we're doing these sorts of dives. So we have to be very careful about our procedures for these dangerous dives. When we're in the polar bear country, we're actually living in a small shack rather than tents. This is a little 10 by 10 for 6 people. So myself and 5 guys, sharing a narrow bit of space and one outlet to the generator. So we have a lot of camera batteries and things to charge every night. But the color of the sea life in the Arctic is as beautiful as it is in the tropics, and at times, healthier and more abundant. And as I mentioned, even just diving around the ice itself, I feel like that's an endangered species as well. So the one question that people always ask me is, aren't you afraid? And I want to tell them, you know, I am not fearless. I'm afraid all the time. Like if I'm about to jump in the water with a polar bear, of course I'm afraid, but I'm afraid before every dive. And it's important for me to dive with people that are also afraid, because it means that we both care about the outcome of our choices. It means that we've done a good analysis and an assessment, and that we're going to be willing to abort if we need to. Because you have to be willing to get within just a hair's breadth of what you consider to be complete success. But then to say to yourself, no, not today. I have to turn around. So you have to be able to say no and come out. There'll be another day. And, that's true whether you're, swimming with a polar bear or just doing something else that scares you, anything that scares you. Like if something startles me, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take a deep, deep breath right down into my hips, all the way up into like my neck almost. And as I do that, I'm going to say, hey, emotions, you won't serve me well right now. So I take those emotions, those what I call chattering monkeys, right? Like heart rate's racing, your respirations have gone up, your head's exploding in a million thoughts. And I have to go, emotions, you won't serve me well right now. Just, go over there. And then I just work towards the next best step. So you can't always know what the big answers are in life. You can't always know how you're going to get out of that dark cave, but you always know the next step. You always know the next best thing to do in life, whatever you do. And you've got to be content with taking those small pragmatic steps and celebrating the successes and moving towards success, but also embracing failure, because failure's just discovery learning. It's not negative. It doesn't need a negative context, right? Failure gives you an opportunity to learn something new and put those lessons to work. Certainly, there's not a single invention on this planet that was invented in the first try. And there are a lot of things that you can see in terms of exploration, where you can see exploration and learning happening. Like if you've got a Roomba, right? A Roomba vacuum cleaner, the Roomba vacuum cleaner runs around the room and bumps into things. That's how it learns. When it bumps into things, it adds it to the map. Bumps into the wall, adds it to the map. Bumps into the chair, adds it to the map. And slowly it gets better and better at what it does. Well, every once in a while, a Roomba vacuum cleaner also runs into something unexpected that wasn't on the map before, like a pile of dog poop, right? And spreads it all over the house. But then the Roomba might not have learned from that one, but the Roomba owner did. So exploration is discovery learning. So whether you're swimming with the polar bear or you're going into an iceberg cave that nobody's been before, it's all about stepping into the darkness. Even if you're just putting some thesis on your advisor's desk, I mean, that's a big leap of faith in exploration and communicating your new ideas, right? So stand on that edge of the darkness, take a deep breath, allow your eyes to adjust to the light, because that's where you have the opportunity to do something truly exceptional for yourself, something new for yourself, or maybe something completely new for humanity. So you might never be a cave diver. In fact, I'd be shocked if there was anyone on this call tonight that wants to be a cave diver. But just think of it as an expression of, going into the darkness. This is where we share the experience of discovery and wonder. And that's what allows us to have a continued optimistic outlook on solving very large global issues. So, my fellow explorers, I think this is a great time to open it up for some questions from you. Feel free to type them into the chat and they'll be sort of relayed to me for answering.
Well, that was wonderful. Actually, I do have one question. When you were talking about when you were down in, I think, the Mayan or the Aztec, I can't remember, and you were talking about that technology that was able to map the artifacts, right? So then you can take it to archaeologists. So the software that does that, was it developed specifically for that, so those professionals, so archaeologists, or was it kind of a byproduct? Like, were they doing it for another industry, and it was like, oh, we could actually use this to help these other researchers? How did that come about?
So my colleague, Dr. Corey Jaskolski, was the innovation fellow for National Geographic at the time when he developed a proprietary software for us to do. It's called 3D photogrammetry. So when we first started doing it, we were shooting a whole bunch of pictures. The software could look at the aspect ratios and resolve those, but also match up common things from one photo to the next so that they'd all seem together, to the point where we would have like 100,000 data points per square inch. Now, he's continued to develop that software, but others have too. So honestly, thanks to a lot of people in the gaming industry as well, this is becoming quite common now. And you can buy a program like Agisoft, AGI Soft. That's the most commonly used one today. And you can actually now shoot like a continuous video, like you could swim around a shipwreck shooting video, and Agisoft could resolve that all and turn it into a 3D model for virtual reality or augmented reality. So this really is going to be quite common in the future, and I think it will fuel education, tourism, scientific research, everything. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it was
Mhm.
fantastic because, like you said, you don't want to displace things that belong there, but they're
Right.
they're of significant value to
Yeah.
many different types of researchers.
Yeah, and now simultaneously they can all look at it at once. Like
Yeah.
the sloth was one of the things that we did first. It was in a cave in Cuba and it was embedded in the floor, and we brought out the 3D photogrammetry, and the scientist was looking at the bite pattern on the teeth, the detail of that, in order to determine that it was a new species. So the detail was incredible.
Wonderful. Okay, so I do see that we have some pre-submitted questions that I want to get to
Mhm.
too, because those people asked that. But some are starting to come in. So um Helena is asking, what is the scariest thing you have experienced?
Ooh. Um, Honestly, I think probably swimming with the polar bear was pretty high on the scary list. I mean, my colleague had done it before, and he told me, "Oh, you should be more scared of the walruses." But it was quite clear that that polar bear was hunting us, and so that was quite terrifying. But I've also been trapped inside a cave behind a scientist that panicked, and that was quite a frightening thing to resolve for both of us. That was a terrifying day overall, I would say.
Probably more for that person than
Yeah.
I'm sure it was terrifying for you, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, that's where I guess there's a lot of deep,
Mhm.
deep breathing in the deep sea.
Yes.
So, Barbara is asking, how do you fund these activities?
Mhm. That's a great question. And it's really relevant, especially to any students that are listening today. I mean, my parents would have worked for one place for their entire life, had a pension, and that's it, right? Well, that's not the experience that people will have today moving forward. You'll all have a bunch of jobs, you'll be mobile, you'll be moving, and you'll be kind of entrepreneurial. So in a way, I'm entrepreneurial. I never quite know where the next paycheck is coming from, and I have therefore a wide swath of skills and things that I do, sometimes working for others and sometimes completely independently. So I may work for someone for a television program, for instance, and shoot a documentary. Or I might actually come up with my own idea and then go pitch it and make an independent program funded by a broadcast network. I might work for, well, this summer I worked on contract for Fisheries and Oceans Canada doing some research that was connected with Canada's longest underwater cave and some pretty interesting life in the Ottawa River. So a little bit of everything, but then I'll, write books and do magazine articles and sell photos. And the reason why I'm sharing all of this is because whether you're an explorer or whether you're, a scientist or really any discipline, you need a lot more wide skills to succeed. Like you need to create your own brand so that when someone Googles you, they see the information that you want them to see if you're applying for a grant, which means you're going to have to be a half decent writer. You might need to shoot a few photographs. You're all going to have to speak and present your ideas, your thoughts, or present your thesis. So, go to Toastmasters, a practically free club where you can enhance your speaking skills. So there's a lot of those soft skills that I think everybody needs today. And those soft skills have enabled me to find those paychecks and work independently, controlling my own, schedule and activities.
Jack of all trades, right? You
Yeah.
gotta.
Jill of all trades.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, of course, the Jill of all trades, of course.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so uh W. Patrick has a question, and it's an interesting question because you do a lot of research to help out with environmental issues. So he would like to ask, how do you measure your impact on the environment when carrying out these dives?
Yeah. That's a great question. In fact, when I started using rebreathers back in the 90s, one of the reasons that we wanted to use them is because we were working in some caves where we wanted to minimize our impact, because even your bubbles striking the ceiling of the cave can cause silt to rain down, and that changes the environment as well as the visibility. But if you're exhaling into the water column, you're actually changing the water chemistry too. So the rebreathers allowed us to have less impact in these environments. We are highly trained in terms of our diving techniques and protocols. So it's always no touch. I mean, we don't harass animals, but we also don't touch the geology in the cave, or even, you know, particular animal life. For instance, like I've been working on mussels, bivalves, recently, and we have very strict permitting guidelines for even the temperature that you could handle an endangered mussel, so it's not harassed. So there are a lot of protocols and scientific permits for a lot of these things that will, you know, limit our activities, and then also ensure the best conservation practices for the time as we know them. We're always getting better.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks,
Mhm.
W, for that.
Mhm.
You were talking about, sorry, you said not mollusks. What did you say? Mussels?
Mussels, yeah,
Mussels, sorry, the
mollusks, yep.
mussels.
Mhm. Yep.
So Ala has a question on that. What is the
Yeah.
most fascinating species that you have seen?
Oh, wow. Well, so I am totally into these mussels. It's funny because when you're doing scientific work, there's often a lot more easy support, whether it's for television or research for big animals, right? Exciting whales and dolphins and sharks and things. So here I am working on endangered mussels inside a cave in the Ottawa River. And so I, you know, found a partner at the Canadian Museum of Nature who's a malacologist, and together we're working on this. And I think they're fascinating because I didn't know before I started this work that mussels, freshwater mussels, will almost always have a fish host as a partner. So like a female mussel who has no eyes and no brain, right, grows a lure out of her own flesh once a year at a particular time of year, and then vibrates it in the water column to attract a particular species of young juvenile fish that'll bite at the lure. And when it does, the mussel sprays her babies into the fish's mouth, and they'll attach on the gills and the fins of the fish and rob blood serum for a period of time to feed until the fish's immune system casts them off, and they bury in the silt for a couple of years before reemerging. So I think that's a pretty amazing, you know, collaboration in nature. Because, for instance, the hickory nut mussel that's associated with the lake sturgeon in the Ottawa River where I'm working, they're both endangered and threatened. So you know, understanding that co-relationship is important to both those species, but also, you know, the mussels are obviously a filter feeder. You know, every mussel filtering 1 to 2 liters of water per hour for a lifetime that could be as long as 200 years.
Oh, that really shows, right? Sort of the how ecosystems really work, right? So if you take
Yeah.
one out, like you wouldn't think, oh, a mussel and a
Mm.
fish like the sturgeon. Like,
Mhm.
oh, well, how do they relate? Like, why are they so important for each other? But clearly
Yeah.
they are, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all that in the Ottawa River.
All that in the Ottawa River. You know, honestly, I growing up here, I don't know how I got the impression, but just because of history, I suppose, everybody just kept telling me, "Oh no, don't go dive in the Ottawa River. It's dirty, it's awful." But it's great, right? I mean, compared to the Great Lakes, it's actually in better shape. Like this portion of the Ottawa River where I'm working, we don't even have any invasive zebra mussels yet.
Wow, I thought they were all over.
Not in this part of the river. So you know, the Ottawa River watershed is 1.7 times the watershed of Lake Superior. So it's enormous. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, that
Mhm.
is. So Shauna would like to ask, because you did talk about at one point, you know, the technology had changed and you didn't need to, you know, go down
Mhm.
with the thing that,
Yeah.
you know, there
Yeah.
were machines that could go and with, you know, take
Mhm.
images. So Shauna is asking, is there still a market for cave divers, or has the technology eliminated the need for new human cave divers? Do you have to be in biology, archaeology, geology to be a cave diver?
Yeah, no, not at all. I'm excited that sunfish can replace me because it'll go to places that I can't go to. But I'm still going on projects with sunfish right now. I'm heading up on a project in the spring to Alaska with sunfish. Um, but but no, when I started my career as a cave diver, I think we were really perceived as some sort of an adrenaline fueled sports junkie, right? But during that first project, when we developed that mapper and showed that it worked, suddenly, all of a sudden, scientists went, "Oh, wow. Yeah, the information that you're getting for us is actually quite useful." And there are not many specialist scientists who have also developed cave diving skills or the abilities to use technology, cameras, and everything else. Like, it's quite rare where I'm working side by side with a scientist inside the cave. Usually, my scientific partner is not a cave diver at all. And so we not only need scientists of different disciplines, but I am an artist, right? We need artists and scientists to work together and collaborate, left brains and right brains, and come up with fresh new ideas. So, um, whatever you're taking in university, whatever your field of study, the important things that you're learning are critical thinking and research skills and so many other things that may be applied in ways that you can't even imagine right now. So who would have ever thought? I know my father would have never thought that my bachelor of fine arts in visual communications design would have led me to this today. So it really does take quite a diverse set of interests and capabilities to pull off a
Yeah,
project. Yeah.
certainly does. So there we go, Shauna. I'm thinking maybe Shauna is an aspiring cave diver.
Yeah.
I do want to get to a couple questions. So there's a few more questions in the queue, but some of the pre-submitted questions.
Mhm.
So someone had asked, and I apologize, I didn't write the person's name down, but what is the most unusual thing you have seen in a cave?
Well, I had quite an unusual experience in a sinkhole in Florida where so sinkholes are often like these sort of hourglass shapes, right? They would have formerly been underground and then the ceiling collapses. So I was looking for ongoing upstream or downstream passages that were feeding the sinkhole, and I found a passage a little bit bigger than a basketball, and there was water flow coming out of it. And that's always what's interesting to us because that, shows that we've got turnover in the water. And as I was watching it, an orb, like a jelly-like orb about the size of a basketball, actually came out of the tunnel and was just sort of floating. It was like sort of jellyfish-like, except that it wasn't a jellyfish. So I imagine it was some sort of, bacterial colony, but it was just this, opalescent kind of orb. And I'm like, ooh, that's weird.
Maybe aliens are living
Who knows?
under
Yeah, who
Florida.
knows?
They're sending out a
Yeah.
probe. What is this?
Yeah,
But it's not something you were expecting, right? And
not at all. Yeah, and
yeah.
since that time, I've actually worked with a number of astrobiologists who are interested in bacterial colonies in algal mats that we find in caves, because that's probably more like the primordial soup they may find somewhere else to indicate life. Yeah.
Yes, and for those of you who are familiar with the Origins talk, so McMaster has the Origins Institute, and
Mm,
we have an Origins Institute talk next week on exoplanets. But anyway, the idea that life began in these
mhm,
primordial
mhm.
little hot, super hot ponds, right? Maybe
Yeah, yeah,
that's how they came about. So yeah.
yeah.
Okay, another question that is quite interesting. So when you explore these dangerous places, so this is a pre-submitted question,
Mhm.
does it ever come across your mind that this may be your last adventure? I mean, you talked a little bit about you're
Yeah.
not fearless, you do have some fear.
Mhm.
So, or is that just too negative that you can't go in with that mindset? Is this going to be my last adventure? Because
No, I have to go in with that mindset, really. I mean, because in all honesty, I have lost over 100 friends and colleagues through the course of my career to cave diving and technical diving accidents. It is incredibly dangerous, and so I have to think about those people every time I go diving. And then I've had a couple of close calls, before I go in the water, I always ask myself, like, I literally work through a list, like what can kill me today kind of list, and I rehearse mentally my resolutions to those problems. So by the time I go underwater, I've kind of set that stress aside. And then if something happens underwater, some emergency, I'm in a positive mindset of, oh yeah, I already know how to solve this. And if they snowball and pile up, then I just have to keep telling myself, I know how to do this. I've trained, I've practiced, I'm current. And you just have to maintain that positive mindset. Because that dive where I was trapped behind the scientist because she was stuck, like when I got her freed and patched the guideline, and there was so much that went on, I lost track of her in the silt out because the cave was only about this tall. And I had to make a choice. We were at our maximum penetration of the cave. I now did not know where she was, but the last thing I did was put a guideline in her hand with a directional marker pointing out of the cave. But at that point, I had to kind of, all right, take another deep breath and decide to go further into the cave because I wanted to make sure that I was not leaving her behind. And in cave diving, if you go further into the cave, you'll eventually reach clear water because you haven't been there to disturb it. So once I reached the clear water, I knew I was not leaving her behind. So by the time I came out, I was 73 minutes after her. And um, she'd already, literally called an emergency. People were rushing to the scene, expecting to recover my body, in all frankness. But I had to just hold it together for all that time and do something that might sound counterintuitive to make sure that we both got home safe.
So can I just a quick question? I know we're
Mm.
heading at that point where we need to
Yeah.
say goodbye, but you talked about how, you kind of prepare yourself and you go through all these scenarios. So how
Mhm.
long will you spend doing that? Will you spend, hours, or is it more like 15, 20 minutes? I'm
It's
really curious about
Yeah,
that.
it really depends on the dive. I mean, honestly, there are some times where I am actually preparing for a couple of years to do a dive like those dives at Wakulla Springs with all that technology, practicing and practicing and practicing. And then when I get with my team, we might spend another month practicing until we're really good. And when we know that we're capable of self-rescue and buddy rescue, then we're ready.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a challenge, right? Like
Yeah,
it
it's a
is,
life, a life
yeah.
dedication for sure.
Well, and then, yeah, that it obviously has paid off, right?
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, so Laura, let's end it on Laura's question. So she is asking, when you are not cave diving, how do you like to spend your time?
Oh, yeah, I'm an outdoor girl, so I love riding my bike, hiking, paddling, swimming, anything outdoors. But I still, I still paint and do creative things as well when the sun's not shining on me. But hey, if anybody didn't get a chance to ask their question tonight, just reach out to me on my website, and I'll happily get back to you and answer there.
Wonderful. Well, like I said, it is 8:04. So thank you very much, everyone, for hanging in. Thank you, Jill, for such a wonderful talk. And those images were just fantastic. Like, wow. Yeah, now I
Thank
understand why Shauna is thinking that she might want to be a cave diver to take
you.
some of
Yeah.
those fantastic, with some of those fantastic photos. I am going to just put in the chat here, everyone. Uh, this is the website. If you're interested in seeing what other upcoming events we have regarding our exploration, please click onto that. And I think at the end, we're going to roll something with a QR code. So if you have your phone handy, you can just take that. We have some HPO, which is the Hamilton Philharmonic. So we have some events with Gary Barwin, who is a McMaster grad and a wonderful author. And we're doing some stuff with the McMaster Museum of Art. We have John Weaver, who is in history, and he's going to be talking like maritime history. Allison Sills is the chair of the astronomy and physics department, and she is going to be giving a talk on stars. And we are finishing the exploration series on the 29th with Adam Schultz, who, Jill, because he is also with the Royal Geographic Society, and he is another explorer. So we're sort of starting off with an explorer, we're ending with an explorer, and Adam Schultz is a McMaster grad. So he's going to be talking. He does mostly, well, not mostly, he does all Canadian mapping and adventures, and is a wonderful, wonderful speaker. We've had him a few times pre-COVID in person. So everyone, thank you again for joining us. Jill, that was a wonderful talk. Thank you so much for inspiring us and for sharing, your wonderful stories and pictures and some really important lessons that we can take away from, what you've done and apply it to our own less scary lives.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. We'll see you soon.